The transfer portal is about to start filling up. So as Utah prepares to navigate the portal, which players do they need to prioritize on their own roster trying to retain? We're breaking it down and discussing what Utah can do to become a top 25 college football program once again on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you all for making us your first listen of the day. If it's your first time tuning in, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, you can get in on the action by visiting fanduel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Tony Parks, voice of the Salt Lake Bees. Weber State Athletics does a ton of things up there too, and also a former AP Top 25 voter. So we are going to be talking about what players Utah needs to retain in order to bounce back as a top 25 program. But before we talk about the individual players that Utah has to make sure they lock down in this wild college football free agency, because that's basically what it is now, Tony, I wanted to talk about, since like I said, you were a former top 25 AP voter. So I want to know from what you've seen, and I'll start off by saying this. So what does Utah need to do to become a top 25 program? I think overall, they need to become more efficient in the passing attack. The reason Utah is only averaging 138 yards per game is because people do not respect Utah's throw game. And that goes down to quarterback recruiting and development, growing your schemes, recruiting stronger receivers. Utah's gotten decent number one receiver play, Devon Bailey, Dorian Singer, but the Emery Simmons, the Damian Alfords, these transfers they bring on, they just haven't planned out. You have to become more dynamic on offense to me. So that's the biggest thing when I go, okay, what does Utah need to fix last year? It's the throw game. It obviously starts with the quarterback, but there's a lot that goes into improving Utah's passing attack if they want to become one of the elite teams in college football yet again.
You know, it's interesting you say that, JT, because when you look at Utah, you would think, okay, well, where did that happen? Where did that break down? And you say, oh, well, injuries. Mm-hmm. Injuries is where it happened, and that's really what it's all about. Well, injuries were a part of that. When it comes to the entire recipe that was the 2024 Utah Utes. And I know the season's not finished and all of that. But when you look at this team that was, in my opinion, expected to win the Big 12, I picked them to win the Big 12. I thought they'd be a playoff team. This was not a national championship team, in my opinion, but this was one that, boy, if they get in, you don't want to face Kyle Whittingham. You don't want, just everything about Utah's reputation, I felt like was going to really live up to what it would be this year. And when I think back to the entire season, I can't think of a team that I had higher expectations for that have had a more difficult year. So injuries is an ingredient to that recipe, but there's just so much more that goes into it. Like you're talking about receiver play. I'm in Boulder last Saturday or a couple weeks, for that 10th game that they had of the season. And I'm sitting there watching it, and, I'm watching receivers not come back through the ball. I'm watching them get beat to the spot. I'm watching poor route running on occasions, things like that. And as I'm watching it live and in person, and trust me, Travis Hunter was great, and I got it that Colorado's good, but there were a few moments where you could see just how disjointed they were just a little bit. And sometimes that's quarterback play, where Landon King is wide open down the middle of the field. And the moans and groans in that University of Utah fan section when they missed on that was intense. So you see moments like that, and then you see a moment where a ball gets picked because the receiver doesn't come back through the ball, doesn't high point it well enough, tipped, picked, and you're sitting there saying to yourself, okay, but there was a way to better the chances that it wouldn't go as badly as it did. And so receivers are not consistently doing the things that increase the batting average, if you will, of something positive happening. There's something to that. The other thing is I felt like they had weird inconsistencies in run game, inconsistencies in overall execution. There's just They need to get back to alignment. We talk
Mm-hmm.
assignment sound football. This team needs to get back to being alignment sound, where you can really feel that merry-go-round going. The one thing that I really feel good about for Utah is their physicality is still right there. I mean, that game against BYU, I thought they outplayed them for so much of the game. I thought they were the more physical team in that game, and you could see that. And while Utah, fell in Boulder when I was there, I thought their physicality as a team is something still to be proud of. So still playing hard, and you can still see some of the residuals of that, really well coached, hard-nosed football team. But to watch them, go from, being the team to beat in the Big 12, in my opinion, before it started, to being the team, fighting out of one of those bottom spots in the conference. I can't say I ever saw that coming.
You and me both, my friend. It's been a insane season, just to put it lightly, what's happened with this Utah team. But you mentioned the encouraging things, right? Like against Colorado, yes, the score ends up lopsided. If Wilson doesn't throw an interception on that last drive, when it was really close before the Buffs scored again, it's 24-35. Utah scores another touchdown late on that drive before Wilson looks like he's going out of bounds and then decides to stay in, tries to make a play, and it just gets out of hand from there. That Utah's been in these games. They're not that far off. But the reason that if Utah bounces back next year is because they're going to keep the pieces that make them not far off and also add more talent to that. So now this is where we get into our draft. I want to take turns talking about the players that we think Utah needs to prioritize in the transfer portal era. What is exactly the transfer portal era? A lot of you obviously know, but look, it can be open season in college football. Sure, there are rules and regulations. Like these guys, you can't contact them if they're on the team. There are ways around that, and we see that constantly. Everyone on your roster is in danger of leaving your program. So you need to make sure you are lock in step. You now have that $20 million that as a university, you can invest across all your athletics, a large portion of that obviously going to football. You have your collectives, and you have several other resources you're using to try and make sure your guys stay. So when the question is, who is the number one player that from this Utah roster they have to retain going into next year, my pick, Tony Parks, is Spencer Fano. I think he's just been fantastic. I'm going tackle. When you were talking about building a football team, most important positions to me, quarterback, then it's tackle play. And Spencer Fano is going to be my first guy. Spencer's been fantastic this season. His freshman season was a lot of good, but still, he was a freshman. This year, man, I mean, ever since the Southern Utah game, I feel like he's been fantastic. Great to see him get in the end zone on that 2-point conversion last week, but he has just been so great in pass protection, a mauler in the run game. He's got the potential to be one of the best tackles to ever play at Utah. If Utah is going to be successful next year, it helps with keeping your quarterback upright and protecting him. And who better to do that than Spencer Fano? He is the number one pick for me. Would that have been your number one pick? And if not, who would you go with?
Cam Calhoun.
Oh, wow. Okay. And I know you like Michigan. So you've probably been on his game for a little bit.
Yeah, no. I really liked watching him in person. I mean,
he's a dog.
Not just his ability to maybe be disruptive and getting a PBU and things like that. And man, I really, for his sake, wish he could have finished that pick in the game, against BYU. He was right there, he's in position. The way he mentally processes the game is really impressive to me. And also, then the corners, I thought the secondary altogether did a really, really great job of battling to keep outside leverage. They did a really excellent job of just doing their 111 and then sometimes making good tackles through some contact, while battling, and hand fighting, still being able to go and make a play. So there's stuff like that. And I think he has a few more levels. I think he can be a very dynamic defensive back that, doesn't just do his job and do it really, really well, but then can be an explosive player at that position. So when I watch him, I see his athleticism. I kind of envision bigger and bigger things for him. That's a guy that I would love to see staying in the University of Utah uniform.
He's been fantastic. I mean, you look at it, he has 6 passes defended. That's the second most on the team. And a guy like Smith Snowden was a starter at the beginning of the year. Calhoun started the year hurt. Like his role's just grown as the year has gone on. And Snowden is more of your slot corner. You're going to have Calhoun more on the outside. And I like that pick a lot. I think that Calhoun's another guy I really want to see this team keep. And Sharif Shaw has done such a great job building this elite Utah defensive backfield, as has Morgan Scalley too, Utah's head coach in waiting, who's going to be heavily involved in the decisions of where do we allocate these NIL resources to make sure these guys stay. So those are just our first 2 picks. We got a lot more guys that we're going to be discussing on Locked On Utes in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, and that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And there are tons of great NFL games going on right now. We've got Monday Night Football we're gearing up for this evening, and even moving forward, right? We got so much great college football, college basketball action. We're gearing up for rivalry weekend. We got Ohio State, Michigan. We have Utah against UCF, not a rivalry, but it's the game we get on Friday night. NBA, NHL, college basketball, whatever you're feeling, head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. All right, Tony Park's back in here with me. So we spent Spencer Fano and Cameron Calhoun. Those are our first 2 guys off the board. Tony, I'm a former offensive lineman, so I'm doubling down for my second pick. I'm saying Caleb Lomu. Spencer Fano has been this team's best offensive line, just narrowly, because for him as a left tackle on this team to right away, we didn't see him at all last year, and he's just stepped in and he's been outstanding. I mean, he's gotten beaten a time or 2, I guess, sure. But, man, it's hard to find plays where he loses a rep. I think he's been great. He's only his first year starting, so he's still got 3 years of eligibility left after this one versus Fano's got 2. But you give me those 2 offensive linemen only continuing to grow and get better. And to me, that's where, you'll bring in and add a quarterback shortly after that. But the quarterback you bring in and add, that while you try to get them acclimated to your system and set them up for success, they're going to be well protected.
Okay, I like your picks, man. I like your picks. My next guy on the board would be Keanu Tanavasa.
Took my next one. Yep.
Yep. I mean, I've been so impressed. There's certain players, like I said, Utah and their physicality is something that has still impressed me. And I thought that was one thing that was sad when they, going back to the game where they lose to BYU, let's say, right? And, they fought hard to win the game. They had a great game plan. There's so many positive things that took place. Physicality of this football team, that was a great sign to say, okay, coming out of the bye, things like that. This is still a critical piece of this team and the fabric and the overall well-being of this group. And I love this guy. Everything about him, I feel like he really feels like a guy that should be at the University of Utah in every single way. And so that would be the next guy on my board.
Junior Tafuna is gone after this last game for Utah. Tanavas, the guy who's been starting next to him, he's already become a leader. He's going to grow into one even more. You want to talk about stats, or what we say, Tony?
I was going to say, and you saw the emotion of Tafuna last week as they're getting ready for senior night, how much this meant to him and all that. He talked about how the first 2, a few years ago, those 2 seasons were one way, and these past couple of years have been another. You're hoping that kind of emotion is also within, say, a guy like a Tanavasa who, they know that this place means something bigger to them than just themselves. And so that'd be another guy that I'd love to see stick around.
Yeah, Tanu Vasa has been just fantastic for this team. The leadership. You want to talk about a misleading statistic? He has 1 sack. He's so much more disruptive than a 1 sack type of guy. And that's when you're on a D tackle, you get doubled all the time frequently, but he makes plays behind the line of scrimmage, pushes the pocket all the time. So I love the Tanu Vasa pick. As I said, that's where I would have gone next. But instead, Tony, I'm going to go a place you've already looked in at, the defensive backfield. Smith Snowden has had really grown throughout the season to me. There were moments like against Utah State where he's getting beaten. You're like, oh, come on, Smith. But I will say those are really good receivers that they have down at Utah State too. And he's had some miraculous interceptions. He plays hard. He's so often in the right position to make plays, but that's where he is he's a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman. So just can't always make them at times, but he's still been so good. I think you give him and Calhoun back there going forward, as good as I feel about the tackles. If I feel good about the tackles, it's like a notch lower I feel about those 2 corners. I feel like that's 2 lockdown guys and 2 guys that fit the history and tradition of elite defensive back play for the University of Utah that's known for.
Yeah, when you talk about, my number one pick on this, Calhoun, as you said, now you add in Snowden. Those two, I think a really great offseason will do some great things for them to help hit those levels, because Smith Snowden, out of every player I've ever had a chance to cover at the high school level,
Sky Ridge High School,
inches and instincts. I mean, he perfected those two things to a level I have never seen. And obviously we understand high school and college are not the same thing, but he is a guy with an unquenchable thirst and desire, not just to improve, but to perfect the little things to where he leaves no doubt that he is the very best that he can be in every single square inch of his game. I know he's a harsh critic in a lot of different ways about meticulous things to become better all the time. And he takes so much pride in his game. So I like for him to have a quality offseason. And as you mentioned, Calhoun, and to have him on the other side, I memean, that would be tremendous to see those two once again in the same defensive backfield. My guy, and I can't help it. I'm staying defense. That's just what I'm doing here. Lander Barton is the next guy on my board, because and what a great start that he had to that game against Colorado a couple of weeks ago. But that's another guy with deep-hearted passion. He has the ability to be a big playmaker from his position. And I think he has even more opportunity to grow as well. And the upperclassman years, if you will, of his career, I think are really ready to shine bright.
He was a guy coming into the season that I thought would not be at Utah entering next year. I think, like you mentioned, there's still room in his game to grow. I don't think he's put his best on tape this year. I think he's capable of even better. I expect him to come back, because I do not think coming in the year, I thought he'd go in the first 2, maybe 3 rounds. I don't see that right now. There's been a couple of just lapses, tackling, things of that nature. He can just reach a higher level. I believe in Lander Barton. I think he's going to come back for another season for college football. And I need that to be at Utah as a Utah fan, because I think he is capable of great things. He's already done many great things too. Speaking of guys that I thought after this year would be off to the NFL and I now expect to return, Teo Johnson. And I think that was me being a little overzealous with Teo, because we'd heard the great reports in spring ball too. This is a guy, he came in as a receiver, transferred to be a defensive back just last year, played a lot of corner. This is his first full year at safety. And, he still looks like a guy who's learned the position at times. Tackling hasn't always been there. That's something, if you're going to the NFL, when you're tackling the biggest, strongest, most physical athletes, you got to be even stronger and better at that. He's been really good in coverage. He's had some awesome moments for this team. He's also had some big tackles in the game. The consistency isn't just always there. To me, he's a guy who can be one of the best safeties. He's already one of the better safeties in the Big 12. Right. I think he'd be one of the best safeties in college football if he comes back another year. And I think he should, because I think he's another guy. It's going to elevate his draft stock, and he's an elite defensive back too. So continuing to shore up that defensive backfield, I feel like is crucial for Utah.
All right, we're sticking with that because Johnson was the next guy on my list. So I'll go to Nate Ritchie, who I have been very, very big on since the day he arrived at the University of Utah. And this is, I think it fits into a lot of the discussion you just had a little bit there with Teo Johnson on, I think, it's the bizarre thing about this football season has been, we've talked about the offensive issues, talked about some of the characteristics that look the same. But now I think there's a few guys really ready to thrive, really ready to put the pedal down and land a punch in their growth and development that will start to, open eyes even bigger. So while we still don't know a lot of things about University of Utah football in 2025, let's say, the one thing I do know is there's a number of dudes who are going to go into that off season and they're going to take it very personally, not just because 24 went poorly, but I think they're going to take 25 personally about what they can do with their individual game. Utah football defensively, I think, is still set up to be, quite good if they keep a lot of what we're talking about intact.
Totally agree. Nate Ritchie was fantastic in 2020 for this Utah football team. He's had some awesome moments this year. You're going to lose Gilman from the Stanford transfer. He's done a lot of positive things for Utah. You lose him. You give me Johnson with Ritchie along with Snowden, Calhoun, and then with CJ Blocker, whoever is your other defensive back, maybe Kenan Johnson's going to come back. He had that season-ending injury, Georgia Tech transfer. We don't know where he stands. That's an incredible secondary, and I would love to see Utah bring Ritchie back again. I think I feel good about him. I feel good. There's some other guys like Spencer Fano, Nate Ritchie, Tanu Vasa. Some of these got Lander Barton. They just feel like they're going to stay with this team, this program. It feels like a place they want to be. They want to make it work here. I think a lot of these other guys, that could be the case. We just don't know. That's where it's hard, right? Like, because some of the guys have been here. They've spent all their years here. This is the first place they've committed to, and they've grown from there. And some of the other transfer guys, they've fallen in love with this place, but we've seen the NIL era, what can happen, and things can change rapidly. One more pick for each of us. For my final pick, I'm doing it. I'm going quarterback. Isaac Wilson. I want Isaac Wilson back with Utah football. They need to bring in competition to push him to be a starter. Tony, you can attest this because you were there at the Colorado game. There are flashes and moments with Isaac that I still go, that guy's still in there. The 4-star quarterback, the guy that I believe can one day lead Utah to a Big 12 championship. Is that next year? It's going to be tough, but I believe even in 2 years that he's there. I still believe in Isaac. He has tons of potential, talent. He should have never been on the field. We see players make massive leaps freshman to sophomore year. Caleb Lomu is a great example of that. Cam Calhoun, great example of that. Those guys didn't see the field last year. Now they've come on and played really well. Quarterback's still the most important position. There's other quarterbacks you need to add. Wilson's potential's there. I'm still a believer. I say you got to try and keep Isaac Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, he's so young.
Yes.
And sometimes when I've seen, and by no means do I think all of his play was poor, because that I think would be a harsh critique. There are times where I watch him and I go, man, as a true freshman, this guy can sense the pocket and sense pressure around him as well as any freshman I've seen. I mean, that element of his game, I thought he did some of those things very, very well in the game against Colorado. The other thing, I thought some of the decision making, I'm like, okay, that wasn't a bad decision. Your timing was off. Yes. Now it comes down to, okay, it's the timing of when this happens. But no, I see what he was doing. I understand. He knows, like, he is a very intelligent athlete. He's a very intelligent young man. I'm not just saying that because he's the younger brother.
Well, you've covered him. You've covered him up close.
And I've had a chance to be around. It's not just because I was so close to him. It's not just because I know his dad, not just because I saw his coach, not just because of his older brother. No, it's also because I've watched him from the time he was a true freshman go through growing pains and learning, and he'll do what it takes. The one thing you like about Zach, he's he's got all the passion and desire. That's nice. The expertise, he's always learning that. That's good too. He has the third thing that I just think is very underrated. He will do what it takes. And he understands that it takes what it takes. And he also understands it doesn't take any more than that, but he will do what it takes. And he also understands that you got to be patient with yourself, right? Not overreact to a shortcoming and sell to yourself that you just care so much. Like, no, he truly has, I think, the right mindset of maturity, and he's going to approach that very, very well. Could use a little more touch on a few other throws, right? Just the small stuff like that. Like, they show
the Landon King one, like you mentioned.
They show up big in some of these games, and you'll look at a stat line, and that's another thing. But there's so many positives. I'm with you. I'm definitely
heart too, right? Battling through all the sickness to be out there against Colorado.
All of that stuff, So it's really, really good. All right, a number of different dudes that I have listed out. I've got Landon King, I've got Peppa, I've got Alford, I've got Stanley, but I think I'll go Brandon Rose. I really will, because I want to see that quarterback room still with some deep depth. I still want to see more from him too. Boy, I love the way he owned that start against BYU. He wasn't, he didn't act like he won a raffle. He didn't go out there and try to kind of let the game come to him. No, he settled in nice. That pick in the second half was a bad route combo. I don't know how healthy he was throughout that whole second half as well. I know he was playing through something, but I would like to see him with another chance to compete, right? And so whether or not he's your starter is one thing, but I would like to see that quarterback room, with guys competing, pushing each other, and having it have a little bit of depth to go with that, even though they don't have a guy that, say, won awards yet or did anything like that. There were some positive things that I saw out of both Wilson and Rose.
There were a lot of positives, and competition is the name of the game. It's going to push these guys, make them better. I like it. I like bringing back Rose too. We're going to give honorable mentions in a moment. And we also, Tony, I have a surprise question I'm going to be asking you, and we are going to hit on that question in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game time. Game time is the place to go because Game Picks makes it even easier to get tickets to see your favorite teams play live, even easier. Game Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Picks is a curation that makes it easy to save time, not just on sports, but concert, comedy, and theater events near you. It's also the seat view, my favorite feature. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what kind of a deal you're getting before you make your purchase. There's also the toggle line feature that shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. How annoying is that with the other ticketing apps? You go through, you're like, oh, I'm going to pay this price, and then, oh, surprise fees at the end? Not with Game Time. Low price guarantee where Game Time will also credit you 110% of the difference. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. That's capital L for locked, O for on, C for college, all one word for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, I got my question I want to ask you, Tony, but real quick, honorable mentions. Love that you brought up Landon King. Well, that's an interesting one because obviously this season hasn't gone out King would hope, but I still think the potential is so high with Landon King. He's another one I'd love to see come back. You mentioned there's other guys too. Logan Fano, the guy I feel good like will stay, wants to play with his brother. I feel like Dejon Stanley's got so much potential. Darden Zipper, Carson Ryan, Mike Mitchell, Jonathan Hall, even an Ike Garcia, Corner Canyon Cypress tackle that we haven't seen play yet. There's a lot of talent on this Utah roster still, and I think a lot of these guys are capable of massive things. Was there anyone else you wanted to mention real quick, Tony?
Did I may have mentioned him or not. Caleb Lohner?
Caleb Lohner. I believe Lohner is actually out of eligibility.
Is he? Oh, you know what?
You know what?
I was
weird.
Wrong on that one.
This is where it's so weird.
That's right. That's right.
Because he's played 4 years of basketball, but he's used the COVID year, so he got this one back and he still might play some basketball. Man, I'm curious. He's one I am fascinated to watch the NFL draft process with him.
That's true.
He's going to be an undrafted free agent.
My apologies on that. I was wait.
He's going to be an undrafted free agent.
Rack my brain on a few others.
Yeah. Well, his game is that of a young guy because he's still so new to the game, but the potential is there. Speaking of potential, last question, Tony. You cover high school football in the state. You do your work with Weber. You've covered, like you said, you're involved with. You still see Utah play against Colorado. How do you feel like the state of Utah football, how do you feel like the talent is right now in the state? Well, I feel really good about it.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, it was really weird years and years ago. Alema Harrington and I were talking about it, and we're talking like 05, 06, right in that neighborhood. And while I didn't think it had the same depth, let's say, as Ohio and Texas and Florida, California, I really felt like it was a very underrated place to get, college football talent. And I think it really showed, you'd have Haloti Ngata go to Oregon, right? You'd have a guy go somewhere. But I kept thinking, man, there's a ton of, non-Power 5, if you will, at the time. And then there's a ton of FCS talent here that people are not really looking at. And so when Jay Hill took over there at Weber State, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is about to just kill it because he understood the level of unrecruited FCS talent. And then he flourished at Weber State with a lot of that. And then I think he showed too, he was able to pick up some FCS talent that should have been considered FBS and say Power 5 level. But even all the way back there, 05, 06, 07, I just thought, man, there's better players than I think people realize. And now that, there's more eyes on tape, there's more eyes on games, the coaching level just continues to get better and better and better. This is a state that still I think is mildly underrated, but not like it used to be, just with the amazing amount of talent. Coachable kids, hungry kids, focused kids, well-coached. The fundamentals mean a lot, tackling, blocking, the little things are the big things. And so now when we go to see, the semifinals at Rice Cycle Stadium, when we just had the championship games and all that, what I love, JT, is more times than not, you're watching star players. And then instead of this huge gap and drop off between the star players and the next group down, it's not that big of a drop. And then there's a mild drop between the next tier and the next tier. And so your average high school football player who's not even going to play college football is a dang good football player in the state of Utah. And I think it's been that way for a while now. It's been exciting to see. So I know we just wrapped up the high school football season, but you just kind of look back once again and you're like, this is really remarkable. Just how good the basic player is, and the FCS player, even the JC player for that matter, right? But then the FBS, the Power 5, and now Power 4, you really get a chance to see it flourish time and time again. So even though I think it's slightly still under recruited, I think the state of high school football being produced to the next level looks amazing.
I think it's fantastic, and it is underrated still a little bit, but man, is the class of 2026 going to put a lot of people on notice. And 25's got some dudes too, but man, 26 has got, some absolute monsters, and it's always a fun and a blast to see these guys go and ball out. Just like it's always a blast to have you on, Tony Parks. You are incredibly busy, my friend, so let everyone know what you got going on right now.
Yeah, a ton of different fun stuff, college basketball, whether it be men's or women's college basketball, a ton of games with ESPN Plus and across the ESPN family of networks. And so that's obviously a blast. And, getting ready for everything coming up here soon with the baseball season. We got a new ballpark coming out there in Daybreak here in the state of Utah. So every time I'm out there, it looks better and better and better each time. So that, that certainly it's just exciting. It's exciting to see it all come together and having it build piece by piece. So now with a lot of my football stuff in the books here and that being put away, now the focus moves to college basketball. We'll have a lot happening with, the Big Sky Conference tournament, and that'll be wild. As you know, it'll be here before we know it. So, just fun building towards all of that, and then just, enjoying dad life, man. Having a newborn, and she's, just had her first birthday a month ago, and she's the life of the party, and she keeps me on my toes. That's for dang sure. It's me and my wife, and she still makes us play zone defense because of her, abilities and agility. So it's really cool, man. And life is really good, and to go to the ballpark every single day is a blessing, and then to be able to be around sports every single day is a blessing. So whether I'm hosting with ESPN 700, which has been a blast, being on Locked On Utes with you, or whatever it might be. It's certainly a lot of fun and a good time. So I appreciate you having me on.
Always appreciate you stopping by. The state of Utah is lucky to have you with everything you do, my friend. Thank you again, and really appreciate you, Tony.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you. And my Wolverines, it's not happening.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up to you. I wasn't gonna down you that bad at the end. Big thanks to Tony for coming on. That's gonna do it for our show. We still got a game. UCF is coming up this week. Talk about the final, all the latest from Kyle Whittingham and his press conference. Still a ton to discuss on Locked On Utes. Hope you'll join us tomorrow. We'll see you then.